And good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon everywhere, unless you're watching from Hawaii or some distant land. My name's Jon Noyes. I am a speaker at Stand to Reason. If you're watching, maybe you've been watching To the Point for a while. If not, welcome. To the Point is a fairly regular. I think it's like a bi-weekly or at least two Wednesdays per month, where I hop online and talk about a culturally relevant topic from a distinctly Christian worldview and try to dissect those those issues that are raised. And then I do what I try to is answer questions after about maybe 10 minutes of commentary or so. And to that end, if you have any questions, make sure you add them in the comment section. And after I'm done offering what I have, I'd love to interact with you through the comments. But just so you guys know, my video screen is down here. My camera is up here. So if I'm looking down, especially today, I'm not ignoring you or reading something. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. I thought that it would be fun to interact with a video, a short video, a clip, and maybe a four minute, maybe 5 minutes. I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. Video clip of Joe Rogan on his Joe Rogan experience. He interviewed a while back. I mean, it's not new, this clip. A while back, he interviewed Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh is if you don't know him, we've mentioned him here on To the Point before. He's the gentleman who created and made, well, first it was a documentary, What is a Woman, which we reviewed. And then he went on to, I think he turned that into a book, What is a Woman? And he's done some good work, and he got the attention of Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan is, I don't even know how to describe him. I actually really like his show. When I watch him, I'm entertained. I don't always agree with him. Actually, I don't agree with him on a lot of things. I do agree with him on some things. The one thing I like about the Joe Rogan experience is I feel like when he's speaking to people, he's honest. And I feel like the questions that he asks are legitimately things that he's wrestling with. And in this instance, he's with Matt Walsh, and they're going to talk about homosexuality in the context of marriage. Now, there's one question that Joe Rogan brings up that I want to focus on, and it's right at the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm hoping my tech here works, and we're going to pop on the video of Joe Rogan and then kind of interact with it. I'll probably stop it maybe 3 or 4 times, maybe 3 times. I'm not editing anything. This is what I downloaded off of the internet. So I'm trying to get things in context. 3 or 4 minute conversation between Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh. And the goal, what I'd like to do is maybe point out some areas where I think Matt Walsh did really well. And then maybe some areas where I think if we are put in a similar situation, asked similar questions, how we might be able to reply to them better, offering clarity on the issue, and while also standing firm. And the whole point of this is, I think, and I'll reiterate this at the very end, I think, is that as Christians, I think we need to be better equipped to answer some of the questions that Joe Rogan answers. And if Matt Walsh kind of flounders and struggles a little bit, how much more might you or I struggle when we're put into that similar situation with a friend or whatever? I mean, of course, it's probably not going to be on a nationally broadcast video, and but anyway, so let's just dive into the video, and I hope it works. If you're not catching audio from the video, just make sure you comment in my comment section so I know. So here we go. Joe Rogan, Matt Walsh, picking up mid-conversation, and he's going to start with a question.
God make people gay in the first place?
Well, of course I would say it comes from God. If I didn't believe that, then I wouldn't be Christian.
Why would God make people gay?
Well,
if he didn't want them to engage in gay sex?
All people have proclivities or towards different sins, different things that we would call sins.
Yeah, but if that's like their fundamental attractiveness, they're attracted fundamentally to other men, like, or other women. Like, why? It seems like something that God gave them. Like, why would God give you an attractiveness, or why would you be attracted to the same sex if that was morally reprehensible, if that was against God's will? Why would he instill that lust and that desire and that feeling of being attracted and feeling of being in love with someone of the same sex?
I don't think instilled is not the word that I would use. I
What
don't
would
think
you
God
use?
instills it. I think that one of the again you want to get into Christian doctrine. I mean one of the basic elements of Christian doctrine is that we're a fallen species, and so there are many things that come out of our kind of fallen human nature, and we all have, like I said, we all have proclivities towards sin, and no one's going to live a perfect life, To live to live a moral Christian life is really difficult. It requires a lot of sacrifice, no matter who you are. And that's it. I mean, it's.
Have you wrestled with these thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna pause it right there because I think they've already said a lot. Now we're about maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes into the video, and there's a few things that pop into my mind when I was listening to Matt Walsh answer that question. Notice the fundamental question here. The fundamental question is it centers around God making people gay or with same-sex attraction or homosexuals. And so the question that Joe Rogan asks right up front is, why would God make people gay in the first place? And as Walsh was kind of interacting and he got a chance to respond, like I wanted to ask Matt Walsh what he means when he said, of course it comes from God in relation to the same-sex attraction. Of course it comes from God. He says, if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be a Christian. Well, I don't believe that same-sex attraction comes from God, and that doesn't mean I'm not a Christian. I think Matt Walsh could have been a little bit more precise here, and he goes on to offer. He says, "Well, okay, so do you want to talk about Christian doctrine?" Well, yeah, I think we should talk about Christian doctrine because Christianity is a true story of reality, and Christian doctrine accurately describes the way the world really is, especially when we start talking about how to live life according to a moral standard. Walsh says it's really hard to live a moral Christian life. Well, it's impossible to live a perfect moral life, hence Jesus. And I think Walsh actually missed a great opportunity here, which maybe we'll get into in a little bit. But for now, I just want to focus in on the objection. The objection being brought up, it's not a new one. Rogan's basically appealing to the born this way argument. It's something that's been brought up a ton before. If you remember, Lady Gaga years ago came out with a song, Born This Way, to make the same point. And this is that people are born gay. And then that means, and the argument goes, that means God created them that way, meaning it must be a morally acceptable and justifiable position for them to live those same-sex attractions out into lean into their homosexuality. And in actually one sense, as I was watching this, and just now even again, I find myself actually in a certain point of agreement with Rogan. I mean, homosexuals in a certain sense, and hear me out, guys, hear me out. In a certain sense, people who are same-sex attracted, people are who would claim to be homosexuals, are born with a specific orientation. It is genetic, and Alan Schleman, he does a great job, and I'm sure Harmony is going to link to this article on the STR website. But he points out that this orientation, this genetic, so to speak, disposition leads to desires that not only feel natural, but are considered sinful when acted upon. Right. So Rogan says that same-sex attraction is fundamentally who they are. And this is a huge misconception, by the way. It's a huge misconception. We're not our sexuality, just as we aren't defined by any other desire, especially a sinful desire, even if that desire is innate within us, even if it comes with our genome, and homosexuals aren't unique in this. We all have proclivities towards behaviors God has deemed immoral, and Walsh he steps into this a little bit, by offering a somewhat of an apologetic for the Christian worldview that we're all fallen and broken, right? And that's where he starts talking about sexual ethics and living out the ethic. or a moral life according to Christian doctrine is really difficult. Well, it's impossible. It's impossible. That's why we need Jesus. And I think that this is really important to understand, that just because we're born with a certain disposition doesn't make that following out and living according to that disposition morally right. It'll never be right for me to act selfishly or to abuse another human being, or it'll never be right to cheat on my wife, or to steal, or to murder, even if I'm born with that predisposition. For example, if I'm born with a predisposition towards alcoholism or drug addiction, it doesn't justify my leaning into that and doing drugs. And I thought Walsh could have done a little bit better here by drawing that distinction. And I'm going to get to this in a little bit, but it seems to me like what's going to happen, and we're going to see it in the next minute or so of the clip, that Walsh seems to be backing off from wanting to present his position as growing specifically out of his Christian worldview, which I think is a huge mistake. So let's pick it up. Walsh has just responded, and now Rogan is going to ask another question and dig a little bit deeper. And I really like what Rogan's about to say. So, anyways, I'll mention that in a minute.
Have you had these kind of conversations and really
Sure, absolutely.
tried to figure out why would God create gay people? Do you think that God has created gay people, or do you think they have a choice?
God has created all people, so every person that's gay was created by God, of course. Where exactly does that proclivity come from? Like I said, I don't know exactly.
Well, I'm just going to pause it there for a second, and I'm going to let him finish. But like, the proclivity comes from being born sinful, being born into sin, and apart from Jesus, there's no conquering that. So let me finish. I don't know how much longer he has here, but he says, I don't know exactly where the proclivity comes from. And then, so here we go.
To say that someone's born gay, I have issues with that go beyond theology, because now you're talking about, if you're born with any sexual proclivity, then that means that we're talking about like gay infants and so on. And
right. Yeah. So in one instance, I want to agree with Walsh here too, and he's making a point that I think that we could all make, that number one, right now, according to science, genetics, there is no gay gene. We haven't discovered any gay gene, but it doesn't matter, and we're going to get to that a little bit later in this. But it doesn't really matter that there's no gay gene. There's two things, and this is where I wish Walsh had gone right away. And I think there's a reason why he didn't. There are two things about every human being that are true. First is that every single human being is made in the image of God. Every single human being is made in the image of God, regardless of whether they believe that or not, regardless of their sexual orientation or whatever, however they choose to live their lives. They are made in the image of God. And it's this thing that lends to each and every person intrinsic value and worth, dignity, and they're worthy of my respect and your respect as well, because they're made in the image of God. That's the first thing that's true of every single human being. They're made in the image of God. But the second thing that's true of every single human being is that the world isn't as it ought to be. You see, God created us, but sin corrupts us. Every single one of us falls short of the glory of God. We're all fallen and broken, in need of rescue. We all need a rescue. We all suffer from the same disease, so to speak, sin. And these things are fundamental to our humanity, to our anthropology. We're made in the image of God, but we're fallen and broken, in need of a rescue. And then I think that this is important, just because in this conversation, just because we're born with illicit desires doesn't mean God caused us to be that way. You see, at the base of this objection is the idea or the understanding that God made us that way. Therefore, God is either responsible for our sin, or since he made us this way, we should be able to live according to our sin. And Rogan's gonna jump into this a little bit deeper in the next portion of this short clip, but God's the wrong person to blame here, because it's a genetic problem. It's a problem that each and every one of us is born with. And I said it before, but the same-sex attracted person isn't special uh, in their leanings towards sin. All of us are. We're all made that way. And in this way, I'm reminded of Nicodemus. If you remember the story of the account of Nicodemus, right? What must I do to be saved is what Nicodemus says, right? Well, you must be born again. And that confounded everybody in the audience when Jesus said that, because like, how am I supposed to crawl? Like, it's just like, you can't be born again, but he's meaning spiritually born again. That's what's true of every single person, and this is really important to understand, because, and I think that maybe this is the biggest misstep I think that Walsh made in this clip, and in the larger interview too. We had a really long conversation, and I think that he made this misstep, that our goal, friends, our goal isn't to make gay people straight. Right? It's to see sinners become holy. Even if people are born that way, even if people are born that way, so is everybody. We're all born that way according to a certain sinful desire, and it really doesn't matter though, because we have to be born again. We and I me too, right? I too have issues, in my life, and I need to be born again. And I have been born again by Christ, and that's what's true of everybody. We all have to be born again. That's what Jesus says to Nicodemus, and yeah, and so in one sense, I agree with Walsh. I have issues and difficulty agreeing with the fact that people are born gay, for example, because there's no, according to genetics, there's no gay gene. But at the same time, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter if we're born with the gay or straight or any of these things, because in order to be saved, we have to be born again. And then this is a distinctly Christian principle, and this is the only solution to the predicament that humanity finds itself in. And I just wish Walsh had hit this a little bit harder. Let's continue on here, and Rogan's going to pick this up again.
But don't you think people are born straight? That some people are born straight? Were you born straight?
It's an odd way of talking about it. Like to say that a baby is heterosexual. I think babies don't have a sexuality in that sense.
Keep watching, because this next point that Rogan's going to say here is responding to this, and I sympathize with Walsh. I sympathize with him. I don't like the categories that are being used, and he should be asking. If I were Walsh, I'd be asking clarifying questions. But listen here carefully to what Rogan says.
Right, but eventually they will develop a sexuality, and a small percentage of them will be homosexual.
Yeah,
and that's always been been documented. It's natural.
Yeah,
it's even natural in some animals.
Yeah, well, I mean, we started by talking about laws and what laws are put in place. Now we're talking about Christian teaching.
But don't you think...
So there's a lot here said. One, I want to bring up I first want to notice an inconsistency with Rogan's response here. Remember, Rogan is saying that we're born with our sexuality, and this is the whole premise of his, the underlying issue, the argument that I'm born this way, right? But then here Rogan says that he explicitly says, but we develop a sexuality. He says, but eventually we develop a sexuality. You can't have it both ways, Mr. Rogan. It's either we develop it or we're born with it, right? Either it's innate or it comes with you, right? So either it's innate and you're born with it and it comes with you, or it's developed according to some phenomena, whether it be environment or how you're raised or any one of these things. So you can't have it both ways. It's one or the other. So there's an inconsistency, but that's not, I don't think, the most important thing for us to pay attention to Rogan's response here. Joe Rogan is under the impression that homosexuality is, and notice he uses the word natural, and then he starts to mention that it appears in other species of animals. Well, first, who cares? Who cares if it appears in other species of animals? I mean, a lion doesn't ask a male lion doesn't ask his partner's permission to procreate with her, right? But we do as human beings, because we're altogether different. We're different. Animals don't rape each other, and they don't murder each other. I mean, they kill each other, but they don't murder each other because they're not moral in that same way. And so that's where it's kind of like, well, who really cares if animals express what would be categorized as homosexual behaviors? Just because an animal does something, it doesn't make it right for a human to. It also doesn't make it wrong for a human to. So anyways, but second, and I think more importantly, what Rogan means to convey by saying homosexuality is natural is that it's normal, and that God's simply punishing people for doing carrying out a life according to how he made them. But this isn't true, right? God doesn't punish us for who we are. He levels his judgment for how we behave, right? We're all fallen and broken. We're all in desperate need of a rescue. And God, he doesn't condemn people for experiencing same-sex attraction too. And I really do wish Matt Walsh was clear here. I have a number of friends who are same-sex attracted, and they're brothers and sisters in Christ. I was just with Christopher Yuan at Summit Ministries, for example. And I got to hang out with a woman named Rosaria Butterfield, and they've written extensively on this issue. God doesn't condemn people for experiencing same-sex attraction. The Bible prohibits the behavior, homosexual behavior, and it's not your feelings that matter here. It's your actions. And also notice another kind of premise. I'm going long here today, but that's okay, I think. Another premise that's not being said, and what Joe Rogan, I think, is meaning. And I really do like I like the way Joe Rogan is. He seems like he's authentic and real. And he's just, have you ever struggled with this? Like, for real? Because I think Matt Walsh is floundering. It seems to didn't you think about this stuff before you came on the show? Like, haven't you wrestled with this? And because I think that it's a legitimate question from Joe Rogan. But when he says that something is natural, what he means is it's normal. And that's where I'd push back. I don't know what he means by natural. I would ask him that question. I would say, hey, well, hold on one second. It's natural, and we see it in the animal kingdom. Like, what do you mean by natural? Because if you look at, like, everything has a telos, a meaning or a purpose, and homosexual behavior doesn't seem to line up with from a purely physiological vantage point. It doesn't seem like homosexuality lines up with the telos of the body, for example. So I would have pressed Rogan a little bit, and I would have asked him, but that didn't happen, so I don't know. So I don't want to put words in Rogan's mouth. But anyways, okay. So now Rogan's going to respond, and I think that this is kind of going to take us towards the end of
Christianity has I don't deny it, that Christianity has a challenging sexual moral code, but we're also, I'm not suggesting that the Christian sexual morality should be codified into law.
First, I said it before, it's impossible to live according to the moral law. It's impossible. That's the point of the gospel. And I think Matt Walsh missed a great opportunity here to explicitly explain what the gospel is to Joe Rogan. And I wish that he had. The idea that we're made perfect and right in the beginning, as God created man and woman, he made them very good, and in the garden they lived in bliss and perfectness. But then sin entered the world, and then as sin entered the world, it corrupts everything. It corrupts our relationship with each other. It corrupts the relationship we have with the environment. It corrupts the relationship that we have with God. And apart from a savior, apart from a rescuer, we are all in a pit. But God chose freely to give his only son over to a death that we deserve, to pay a penalty that we deserve, and to pay a price that we can't afford. And in so doing, he offers to us eternal life, and he guarantees it as he raised Jesus from the dead. Something like that I would have loved to have seen. I would have loved to have seen here. But anyways, okay, let's just keep going.
But isn't that
We're down
what's
to every
happening
jump
if that's how we define marriage? Because marriage is law.
Hold on. Note there's like, why? I would ask Matt Walsh, why do we not want the biblical ethic codified into law? I think the founders, to a large extent, I mean, really imperfectly, but to a large extent, the founders of our country based the ethic that they were chasing after and that they were founding this new government on, was on the law of God. So why wouldn't we want to codify it? In many ways, it is. The thou shalt not murder. I mean, what other system are we basing our judicial system on here in this country, at least historically, if not the law of God? And notice Walsh, he's trying to avoid bringing up God. He doesn't want to use he doesn't want to use certain theological terms, I feel like sin and things. But let's watch the end of the clip, and then I'll offer some parting thoughts.
And if marriage shouldn't involve gay people, then you are saying that it's because of Christian fundamentalist ideology.
No, because I think you can talk about the marriage issue without even getting into biblical morality, which is what I was doing. I mean, you brought up the Bible,
right?
I didn't.
Well, I brought about we talked about Christianity, in particular,
right? But that's my point. It's like you introduced that to the conversation,
yes. Because I wanted to find the reason why you opposed gay people being married.
Yeah. I think this is a great way to end it here. At least this clip, the editing it out and fading away there, because it gets back to why we started, right? Rogan's just trying to figure out like why God made gay people and why we think that since God made them that way, we don't think as Christians, as fundamentalists, notice you use the word fundamentalist, why we don't think they should be able to be married. I want to notice something. It's something I've been pointing out a couple times already, that Walsh tries to avoid bringing God into the conversation. He says that flat out. He doesn't want to use these theological terms, doesn't want to get into theology. And then he mentions, oh, well, Joe, you brought this up. Well, thank God he brought it up. Because this is the basis of it. When we say something is morally wrong, what are we saying? I think such and such a behavior is wrong. Are you saying like it's my personal preference that it's wrong? No, we're not. It's not a matter of personal opinion. We're saying that we think that the action that is in discussion, the action is actually wrong, and it's not the way that it's supposed to be. And in order to make this claim, in order to make an objective claim, there needs to be two things. First, there needs to be an objective moral standard, and if there is no God, there is no standard. If relativism is true, we have no standard of right and wrong. There's no scoring system, so to speak. And second, first we need an objective moral standard. Second, we need an objective moral standard giver. Where'd that standard come from? Where'd that scoring system come from? It has to come from somewhere or someone. And when we try to divorce our views on homosexuality or marriage or anything else for that matter from the existence of God in our Christian worldview, the arguments just fade away. Remember, guys, there is no neutrality here. There's no meeting people where they're at. That just doesn't exist. And I don't understand oftentimes when Christians, and Matt Walsh is a Christian, why would he go into this interview trying to meet Joe Rogan, who's not a Christian, I don't think, who's not a Christian, where he's at, so to speak, on a topic like marriage. You see, that marriage is something. Marriage is an institution that's been defined for us. We don't define marriage. And this was at the crux of the argument, whenever, not quite 10 years ago, but like whenever the Obergefell decision was rendered. This was at the crux of the argument in the cultural conversation, and I feel like maybe we were too soft on it. Marriage is something, just like an ashtray is something. Like you can redefine. You can say an ashtray is food, but it doesn't make it so. It doesn't make it good and nourishing to eat. You can't eat an ashtray. And the same thing with marriage. Marriage is something. It's defined by God. It's an institution that's been given by God. One man, one woman, one flesh, one life. Now, if we want to talk about equal opportunity and equal rights, let's do that. Let's do that. But supposedly redefining marriage isn't what we do. And I think the meet them where they're at mentality has gotten us to the position where we're at today. We need to take hard, fast stances and draw lines on these principles. And I wish that Walsh had done that. I think that, I mean, the rest of the interview, I mean, it's over an hour long. You guys can go watch it. On Rogan's Spotify channel. And he does really well. And that the woman in other areas. And then the What is a Woman documentary, he did, I thought, really well, asking some questions that are really important. But here, I think he could have asked some good questions, and it felt like he was kind of put on his heels. And that's kind of like what I want to take away as I wrap up here. Gosh, 30 minutes in. This is the longest to the point I've done in a long time. The reason why I bring all this up is because we as Christians, we need to be articulate and responsive to the culture, but we need to be able to articulate the truths of the Christian worldview in a way that our audiences will understand. And we need to be prepared for some of these issues to be brought up in everyday conversation. And in order to do that, we have to first know what we believe. We need to know what we believe. But above that, I feel like, well, actually under that, you learn what we believe, right? The central tenets of the Christian worldview. But undergirding all of that, holding that all up, we need to know why we believe it. First, we need to know what to believe. Then we need to know why we believe. We need to have good reasons for the beliefs that we hold. And then we need to be able to express them and articulate them in a way that is, I'm not saying it's going to be accepted or palatable, or palatable is the word. I mean, it's not going to be accepted or palatable to the culture, but we need to be able to articulate it in a way that people understand. And how do we get there? Well, there we need to train. We need to train our hearts and our minds and we need to do that now in preparation for tomorrow, right? The soldier, the recruit, we train now before the battle so that we can win the battle. You don't wait till the battle comes. And I feel like Christians, we've been far too reactionary to a lot of these things. And I think that this video that I showed, the short video clip, exemplifies why that is. So with that, guys, that's my kind of my commentary, my interaction with Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh and their dialogue. Do go and watch the whole thing. It's really great. So I'm gonna look down now, and I was watching the video before when it was on my screen. Now I'm gonna look at the comments and see if you guys have any questions or comments that I should be responding to. And while I do that, guys, thank you guys so much. Hey, Harmony, dude, you're amazing. I always say that, and she tells me to stop, but she is. Like, she adds all the links and stuff in real time, anyways. Matt, hey Matt, thanks for tuning in, dude. I love that picture, man, with you with the Stanley Cup. Hey John, glad you mentioned Alan's quote. You can tell that Matt Walsh was struggling with answering Rogan's Born This Way. Yeah, he was a little bit. I mean, Matt Walsh is obviously a smart guy, right? He's very clever, and he's articulate normally, and he does some good work. But I think here, going on the Joe Rogan show, speaking about these issues, I wish that he was a little bit more prepared, as he was kind of searching for answers. But yeah, let's see here. Walsh is being elliptical. Is he afraid of speaking plainly? Excuse me. I think it's more than just Walsh. This is one of the issues that if I'm being honest with you guys, this is one of the issues I have with kind of the conservative commentary folks that are out there in general. I feel like if they are, oftentimes they aren't Christians, so I don't think that they necessarily have a complete picture, and they don't necessarily have really a full foundation to stand on. So their arguments at some point will break down. But Um, it's also, I feel like they're sometimes afraid of mentioning God, or they want to come at it from a naturalistic perspective, like what Walsh was doing. Hey, I didn't bring up the Bible. You brought, well, somebody should bring up the Bible when we're talking about marriage and homosexuality and sin. And like, I mean, if you're not bringing up the Bible, what are you doing? You know, because that's our foundation. You know, that, yeah, there's a lot to say there. And so he's afraid to speak plainly. I feel like there is that fear in general, because I think, I think that for a number of reasons, which maybe is another to the point that I should do, but I think evangelicalism has been, hijacked. The term evangelicalism has come to mean something other than what it really means or historically has meant. And I think it's yoked itself with conservatism or republicanism, and that's caused some issues. And so now, people are less, there's a reaction, a negative reaction when somebody hears something from a Christian perspective, not because of the Christian perspective, but because of what they associate that Christian perspective with. Mainly it has to do with politics. Anyways, and that's maybe what Walsh is trying to avoid here, but it doesn't work. Yeah, Howard, is aborting trans babies then transphobic? Yeah, you know what's really interesting with this conversation? I didn't get a chance to mention it, but during the one of the things that came to my mind during the video was, so we're born this way. Okay, so that means what if it is genetic? Like, what if we can find a gene that causes same-sex attraction? I wonder how the the community, the LGBTQ plus community would react to scientists, to geneticists saying we now offer a procedure that can now correct that aberrant gene from developing that way. So you can choose to make your child, or guarantee to make your child, same sex attracted. And I wonder how that community would react to that. Taking it a step further, if it is genetic and we do find something in the genome and we can test for it, just like what we've been doing for Down syndrome babies, we've seen absolute atrocious things where people get the diagnosis of a Down syndrome baby and they abort him or her for the very fact that a test came back with an extra chromosome. And what if we can test the DNA of a fetus and find that it has a predisposition to same-sex attraction, and people choose to abort? I wonder what that could, it's just going to be it would be interesting. We aren't there yet. And I don't know if we'll ever get there. It doesn't seem like it's genetic, but it's just interesting. And it all goes back to one of the two things that are true of every human being. We're all made in the image of God, regardless of your disposition, regardless of your sexual attraction, regardless of how many chromosomes you have. You're all made in the image of God. And that's what makes us special and unique, worthy of life, respect, and dignity. Anyways, okay. So the Bonoboo chimp is our stand-up morality. I don't know what the Bonoboo chimp is. I'm really bad. I've assumed that's something with pop culture, and I have no idea what that means. But along this lines, Rick, I think you're bringing up a point without me knowing the Bonoboo chimp. We go to the zoo a fair amount here. We live in the center. Like, I live a little ways from Santa Barbara. It's just north of me. And so we go to Santa Barbara Zoo, and there they have silverback gorillas. And I mean, in times they act just like us, right? Or we act just like them. I don't know how you should say it. But at certain times, there are some vast differences. You know, they eat their own feces, which is just gnarly, you know, and that's not like just because they do it doesn't mean we should do it. And so then anyway, so you can't superimpose our system of morality on top of another animal, even a primate. And you can't do the reverse either. You can't superimpose a primate, thank God, a primate's morality on top of humanity, like a great ape's morality. It doesn't work like that. Thank God. Let's see here. Until the moment of choice, your sexuality isn't defined. I think I know what you mean here, Martin. You could be same-sex attracted and still love and follow God and be saved. You know what I mean? We do have choices. Just like I can choose not to cheat on my wife. I can choose to cheat on my wife. You can choose who you want to sleep with. And that's what I think we mean when we say homosexuality is a choice. But one of the tips that I've learned actually from Alan Schleman he does these things that and I've actually incorporated into my talk on homosexuality. They're cliches that kill, is what he calls them. Cliches that kill. And one of them is that saying homosexuality is a choice. And he recommends, and I agree with Alan, that we should stop saying that. Not because it's not true necessarily, but because people don't know what that means. Because oftentimes people, they do feel like they've been born with same-sex attraction. And a lot of good meaning people and a lot of good people that do good research would say that we are born with a certain sexuality. But there is a choice when you choose to live that out. So I think that eliminating that phrase, the homosexuality is a choice, is I think a good advice, because I think it doesn't. I don't think it spurs on conversation. I think it just muddies the water a little bit. Instead, I would point out that we're all born with the same problem. We're all born with a propensity towards and a number of desires that don't line up with the moral law of God. And because it doesn't line up with the moral law of God, we stand condemned, guilty, and in desperate need of a rescue. We need a rescuer. And God, thank God, not only condemns us for our sin, but he offers to every single person a rescuer. And his name's Jesus. And how do you receive that? You must be born again through the blood of Christ. So anyways, the good comment. I hope that offers some type of clarity. Here we go, Howard. To understand what is natural, you must study these specimens and then retain their nature. To those that have been corrupted, can't remember who first said that, but I think it's true. Yeah, I like taking the approach when I'm talking about what's natural or normal. The purpose, function come into play. It does with everything. Like, what's the normal prescription for a watch? Well, it's a timepiece. It's made with a specific telos, purpose, and we don't use it according to that function, that telos, that purpose. It's an abuse of that thing. I mean, maybe in the instance of a watch, there's no moral component to it, but if you use a watch will make a terrible frisbee most of the time. A watch will make a terrible stove or microwave because it's not meant for throwing or for cooking, but for telling time, it is. Well, the same thing with the human body. When we look at the human body from a purely biological, physiological standpoint, there's a certain telos that we're made in a certain way. And when you start talking about sex organs and stuff like this, and we won't get into it here, but when you start talking about certain sex organs, that they're made with a certain purpose, and there are certain fits that work, and there's certain types of tissue and certain types of excretions and all of these things. It's an incredibly beautiful system that's been created. And when it's been designed and when used according to its purpose, it functions properly. But when abused and not, there's consequences to that. And sometimes those consequences are dire, and that's why it's not normal or natural either. When we start looking at the consequences of the abuse of these things. Certain types of cancer are prevalent in the homosexual community, drug abuse, certain addictions, suicide rates, certainly. Anyways, so it's important to understand, I think, everything according to purpose and intention, design, telos. So good comment. Side note, Matt, it's so important to trust in the gospel more than popular American journalists. Yes. The gospel is yes, the gospel is the power and demand for salvation. Matt Walsh is not, and thank God, neither is Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or any of these other folks. We chase Jesus. That's who we chase. Eggs, you unsubscribed from Matt Walsh's channel because he has continued to make these same types of mistakes while expressing biblical truths. Yeah, I think I don't follow him, to be honest with you. I don't really follow anybody on social media anymore. I'm taking a break from social media, pretty hardcore. So yeah, it'd be good. I often think this of politicians a lot. I wish that they would get trained in apologetics, certainly pro-life apologetics. I just was talking to Scott Klusendorf. You don't know Scott Klusendorf, he's fantastic. He wrote A Case for Life. There's a new version of that coming out with a lot of new material in it. He started that Stand to Reason, and then he went on to found Life Training Institute, LTI. And anyways, I was talking to him about this, and it would be really great if politicians would get some really robust training on pro-life issues, so that during debates and conversations they could really prove the case. Anyways, stand the reason tons. Yeah, Kelly, I think you have a point here, right? There is no gay gene, not so far, at least. But this is the point: is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we're all born in the same predicament. It just manifests itself differently in different individuals. We're all born with proclivities and dispositions, and that doesn't justify the living out, the carrying out of these proclivities and dispositions, leaning into them. Right? It doesn't. So I think you'd bring a good point up. There is no gay gene. For some people who don't believe in an objective morality, I think the way Walsh is trying to argue is valid. I think a lot of people do try to argue. Well, I think that there's an appeal that, like, I want to meet this person where they're at. I can argue this position outside of biblical morality. I don't need the Bible to prove this point. And my response is, why? Like, why do that? Like, why go down that route? It seems like more work. Number two, in the ends, the fundamental issue is that you're gonna need an objective standard by which you're judging these things, right or wrong, morally speaking, and you're gonna need an objective standard giver. So if the foundation is theological, why avoid theology from the start? I think that, and I'm not a presuppositionalist, guys. Like, that's not my position. I mean, I think there's certain presupposition stances and techniques that work, and certain ones I don't like, but I think I do like the idea of, like, there is no neutrality, and God exists, and we all have to live in the world that he created, whether you believe in him or not. And I feel like that would be an easier case I feel like that's a better case to make, starting there. That's a better starting point. God exists. Now what? Because when you start with the premise that God might not exist, or I don't need to argue from God, why believe, like, anybody's position can be valid. So I think because we live in a relativistic world in that instance. So why meet people where they're at in that, and why not just start from the beginning? If I was on, I mean, I'll never be on Joe Rogan, I don't think, but, like, I would love the opportunity, and because I think that he has a good heart, like, in, you know what I mean by that, like, in chasing the answers, and he asks authentic and real conversations, and I've seen some really great stuff, interviews. I think he does a great job interviewing people and puts them in the hot seat and asks hard questions of them unabashedly. I think he's a smart guy. And I'd love to chat with him, because I'd start from God, because I think God is the best explanation for the way the world really is, reality. And so because God explains where everything came from, he explains the existence of the soul, he explains the existence of a moral depth to the world. Because God exists, we should figure out what God says about these things, because he's God. And then we should follow those things, because not because God says, but because it's the right way. It's the way the world really is. And I think then we could have a conversation. So as opposed to backing off of theological truths, I'd lean into them, because it's the truth. It's the way the world really is. But yes, we do need to get to the root of the issue. Yeah. Yeah, we do need to get to the root of these issues. Let's see here. Yeah, well, Rick, this is good. I mean, he was, I think he's still Catholic as far as I understand. So I don't know, man. I know a lot of Catholics. Well, I don't know a ton of Catholics, but I have a number of really good friends who are Catholic, and they take the Bible very seriously. So they're good people. So yeah, I don't know. The thing is I don't know. To be honest with you, where Walsh is on these things, because he doesn't represent himself in a way that allows anybody to really understand where he is on these things, which is part of the issue, I think. But yeah. Howard, thank you, John, for commenting on my posts. I agree with you. Props to Harmony. Yeah, props to Harmony. Yeah, we should ask the question, what is marriage, and gone from there. I think, and Bobby, this is really clever, man. I think that's good, especially with Walsh, right? What is a woman? What is marriage? Right? Start from there. And because it is something, just like a woman is something. Marriage is something. It's not just defined by our government. It predates our government, but yeah, very, very interesting. And looks like I came to the end of the comments there, and close to the end of our time too. Let me mention a few things as we've got the dip in viewers now, but I should do these things while more people are watching. Reality conference, the Reality Student Apologetics Conference is coming, and if you haven't ever attended a Reality Student Apologetics Conference, this is the year to do it, because we are going all out. I mean, every year when we end the season, we're always like so tired. We're like, oh my gosh, like let's do something simple next year. Well, that never happens. And this year we're digging into identity. Speaking of kind of like what I've been talking about, right? Who gets to say who you are, man or maker? And it's not just for students, guys. You can come if you're an adult. We'd love for you to bring a student or two, or bring your youth group. But make sure you register for one of our 6 reality student apologetics conferences all over the country. They start in September. They follow the school calendar. So September is Orange County, October, Seattle, Washington. November, we get the pleasure of spending a weekend in November in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It always snows. It's great. So then we're in Minneapolis, which, if you're in striking distance of that conference, it's really fun. It's we have like 4,000 people that show up. It's unbelievable. And then so from there, we take the December and January off. February, we go down to Dallas, Texas. March, we go to Philadelphia. And then April, we're in Augusta, Georgia. So we kind of zigzag all over the country. And if you're within striking distance of any of these conferences, make sure you get registered. If you can get early registration, that's great. It's fairly inexpensive. I think it's like, I don't even know. Am I allowed to click on links while I'm out here? This is how you can do it. I don't even know. I'm scared to go off of this site, or I'll lose you guys. But you can go register. It's like $65, I think, maybe for early bird. And the early bird registration might have just ended for Southern California. We're going to be at Biola University this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you register for that. Yes, see, it's not just me saying this. Val's saying this. Reality is an amazing conference for the whole family. See, you're amazing, Val. Thanks. Blaisdell. Val, I used to know Blaisdells. I grew up with Adam Blaisdell, and I don't know who his parents were. But anyways, yeah, reality is amazing. Make sure you keep your eye out for new training that Stand to Reason's doing. We've got Stand to Reason University, STRU, if you go to Harmony's going to put it in here, I'm sure. Hey, Bobby, are you new to Stand to Reason? 4 years. I came on like right as COVID hit, so somewhat new. But anyways, Stand to Reason University. I am not new to Stand to Reason University. I think I've done 3 classes now. Or STR. So go to training.str.org and get involved in STRU. They're courses that are made up of a multiple of classes, each one consisting of a short video between 5 and 10 minutes, most of them, I think. And then you take short quizzes to get to the next progression, to go through the course. And then when you've finished a certain number of courses, certain things open up to you. Like we just had a Meet the Teacher with Greg Kokel. And so that's a private Zoom opportunity with Greg Kokel where you can get on and answer and ask whatever questions you might have. And all of us speakers at some point do a question and answer or Meet the Teacher. So you want to make sure you get involved. It's really great. They just filmed 2 more. There was one that I just got released that I did that is the only one way. Is Jesus the only way? The exclusivity of Christ. So anyways, make sure you sign up for that. And if you guys aren't listening, to Greg's regular podcast, make sure you start listening to that. I think he does now 2 podcasts and plus hashtag STR Asks with Amy Hall. And those are great ways as well to get your questions answered. And then a lot of people don't know this, but if you you can call us at Stand to Reason and leave a message with a question for Greg and Amy, and they'll answer it. And it's a great, people have been doing it. It's great. They'll play your question, the recording, and then they'll do their best to answer it. And so these are just ways that we at Stand to Reason really just want to, engage with you and help you become better ambassadors for Christ. And they're all free. Everything except for the Reality Student Apologetics Conference is free. And we just want to be engaged with you guys, offer you the training that you need so that we can push back at the culture around us. And so with that, guys, make sure Harmony provided links for you to submit questions to the broadcast, and Greg will answer those, and make sure you listen to them. If you don't have our the app or the podcast flagged in whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, you should do it. I listen to all of Greg's podcasts every week because he's just amazing, and I keep learning from him even though I work with him and stuff. So anyways, with that, guys, I'm going to sign off today, and I thank you guys so much for your attention. I thank you for listening to the point and interacting with me too. The best part's the interaction. If I could just do that, I would. So with that, guys, hey, go out, give them heaven, be a representative, be ambassadors for Christ, begging on behalf of Christ to be reconciled to God. Be well, saints of God. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.